Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Marcus Aurelius, and this is Ulm, Forging Ahead. And in this episode, I want to take care of world generation and planning out our pretender god. One of the big barriers, I think, for new players in learning Dominions is the fact that you have to create your pretender god before you even know what your nation is capable of. And in many cases, you need to create a pretender god that strengthens your nation or adds diversity to what your nation can do. And so I'm going to be very detailed in this episode as to what I'm doing with my pretender god and why, and how that is going to inform our strategy moving forward. So if all you want to see is the gameplay and you know all there is to know about Dominions, then you can skip this episode. But if you're interested and you'd like to learn my thought process and what I'm doing, by all means, continue watching. So the first thing we need to do is we need to select the map that we're going to be playing on. And I'm very fortunate because in the time I was planning this series, a new map was introduced on the Dominions 4 Desura forums, and that map is the Old Kingdom by Mormasil. Not only is this map beautiful, but it fits within the Goldilocks zone of maps that I like to play for these series, in that it has just about the right number of provinces, and it wraps both north to south and east to west. So there's not a lot of areas where you can hole up. You've got enemies, in most cases, surrounding you. Also, I kind of like the idea that the way this map is designed is to symbolize an old kingdom that was ruined in a war. And that's really relevant to the story that we're telling in this Let's Play, because Urmor was this great empire that fell, and so these ruins that we're stumbling upon are ostensibly the ruins of the fallen Urmoran civilization. So I thought that really fit, and I like it a lot. So we're just going to call this Ulm. Forging Ahead. And apparently we're not going to do that because that is not a valid game name. So let's try it again, but without the colon. Alright, and this game, of course, will take place in the Middle Ages. So the next thing we want to do is we want to set up our enemies. And there's a bit that I want to discuss about that as well. We, of course, are going to be Ulm, and our main antagonist is going to be Black Ulm, which is like our evil twin. Now, the AI has many different levels. It starts at normal, it goes up difficult, mighty, master, and then impossible. I tried playing this game multiple times on master, and it was fine. I got a good lead. It was playable, certainly. But what I don't like about the higher difficulty levels is that the AI doesn't necessarily become any smarter. It doesn't use interesting or new tactics. It doesn't use magic in intuitive and interesting ways. All it does really, when you raise the difficulty level, is it provides them with a bonus to income and production and supplies. And what that means, essentially, is that the enemies are going to be running around with giant armies of chaff. Just giant armies. And so, while it's certainly challenging, it's also annoying and not very fun, because you're basically just fighting these battles over and over and over again where you are grossly outnumbered, and it just gets tiring after a while, and I don't think that makes for a very entertaining series. So I'm just going to go with Mighty AI. I'm not going to go any higher than that. And, you know, if you search YouTube, I'm sure you'll find series where people are playing against higher levels of AI. But again, all you're going to see is more units. You're not going to see any gee whiz, flashbang excitement. Now, as far as the AI types, I'm going to leave that on random for everyone, but you have standard, defensive, aggressive, and that's it really. So I'm not really concerned as to who's what. It'll be nice to have a mixture. So the theme, once again, of this campaign is going to be Ulm representing humanity, not only fighting against their evil brothers of Black Ulm, but also of these non-human nations that have sprung up after the demise of Urmor and the great human civilizations of which Urmor spawned. So we're going to have the monkeys of Bandar Log, the Bakemono goblins of Shinuyama, the winged beings of Nazca with their mummy worship and death magic, the frog people of Xibalba, and those two are fun because they're two of the most new nations that have been added in a patch, so many people haven't really seen them in action. This will be the first time you've seen them in any of my series anyway. And then, because there's a lot of water in this game, I want to have two underwater nations. We're going to go with Relay, who is a nation of Starspawn from another galaxy who landed on this world, and they are able to enslave Atlanteans to use as their troops. And then finally, Pelagia, which is a realm of Tritons and Mermen, mer-women, mer-people. So those two will fight it out in the sea, while the rest of us fight it out on land. Alright, so here is the flavor text for Ulm. You're more than welcome to read it. You pause the screen. What's worth knowing here is that Ulm has some of the best armies of the Middle Age, but they're very poor in priest power, and they're very poor in magic. They have little magic diversity, and the mages they do have are not particularly strong in the paths that they cover. Now, what Ulm is really, really good at, their kind of raison d'etre, is forging. All Ulmish smiths have a bonus to forging items, and what this bonus means is they can forge items for less gems than other nations. Combined with certain spells and certain items, Ulm can forge relatively expensive items for a lot cheaper than anyone else can. So one of the things you'll be seeing in this series is that we are going to have a ton of items that we're going to be giving to all of our human troops. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to select a pretender god. One thing that's changed since I produced my last series is that the developers are now trying to steer you in the direction of certain gods that are more thematic for your nation. As you can see, as you're scrolling around the types of gods you can choose from, some of them say, reduced by 20 points for this nation. So other nations would have to pay the full price for these pretenders, but you get a slight discount because these are pretenders that suit this nation particularly well. And for Ulm, that is the Tiwaz of War, the Forge Lord, and the Master Alchemist. Now for our choice, what we're going to play with, the idea is that Ulm is fighting for humanity, and they're putting their faith not in gods or magic really, but steel. And so the way we're going to play this is the god of Ulm is not really a god at all, but rather a leader that has been elected amongst the people, specifically the Mastersmiths, to lead them in this conquest. So Ulm doesn't really have a god. If Ulm is said to worship anyone, it is their own human strength and ingenuity and the power of steel. And that is what is going to be represented by our dominion, by our priests. So that is the faith of Ulm, and it is a faith in mankind's ability to defeat these pretender gods and defeat magic and turn the world into a world where mortal men are dominant and not under threat. So because of that, we are going to be choosing the Master Alchemist. And there's also a much more pragmatic gameplay reason for this. The Master Alchemist is a what's called Rainbow Mage, which means the Master Alchemist can have access to a number of different magical paths relatively cheaply. And as a result, we can develop him to have strengths that no of the other mages of our nation have. So it opens up some paths for us that we wouldn't otherwise have, and it gives us diversity. Now, despite the fact that this is at the bottom of the choices, I like to go with the imprisonment status of the Pretender God first, because this determines the number of points that you have to work with. You can either have a god who's awake, dormant, which means they do not show up in the game for about a year, 12 months, 12 turns, or imprisoned, which is about 3 years, so about 36 turns or months. Ulm could really use an awake Pretender, and in many cases, that is what is recommended. Back in the old days, Ulm was regarded as a particularly weak nation. They've since done a lot of work on it, and it's a lot stronger than it used to be. But in the olden days, especially in multiplayer, the thing about Ulm was that it was very easy to defeat right out of the gate. A Bless Rush strategy, or someone who had trampling units like elephants or mammoths, could take out Ulm relatively easily. So many people feel that in order for Ulm to survive, it needs an awake super combatant Pretender. However, as I said, over time the nation has been upgraded and improved, and I don't think that's as necessary anymore. And of course, we're playing against the AI, not a multiplayer game against humans, so it's less of an issue. However, one other benefit of having an awake Pretender is that they can start site searching immediately, which helps Ulm quite a bit, because Ulm starts off with very poor diversity. Not only do their natural mages only have access to earth and fire, with a 1 in 5 chance of having one path in astral or air, but they only generate earth gems. And so we're going to be needing gems from numerous different paths of magic in order to forge the items that we're going to need. So that has to be worked in to our Pretender. I am, however, going to go with Dormant, simply because we absolutely need the points. I could work it out so that he's awake, but it would enfeeble him in certain ways that would make it hard for us. So the first thing you need to know with Ulm is incredibly expensive, both in gold and in resources. And also, because Ulm is a nation you're going to want to use large armies with, especially against the AI, it's going to need a lot of supplies. So almost out of the gate, you need to have 3 order, 3 production, and 3 growth. Now, I like to pay for that by giving us 2 drain. And the reason for that is Ulm's mages, the smiths, are not negatively affected in terms of research by being in a drain dominion. So even though it says 2 research points here, that does not apply to Ulm's master smiths. The reason I'm not doing 3 drain, which would give us even more points, is because there are certain events that happen in the game that detract a number of gems from your gem treasury. And because we are going to be hurting for gems throughout this entire game, I don't want to have access to that event. I don't want that to happen to us. Especially once we have a lot of different territories, it increases the risk. So that risk is mitigated somewhat by having only 2 drain. It's still a bonus for us because other mages are operating at a disadvantage inside of our dominion, but it's not going to cripple us if we have some bad luck. I normally like luck, but in this case we're going to leave it alone. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to give us a bit more points by taking 1 in cold. Now this will reduce our income by 5%, and it will reduce our supplies by 10%, which we can survive. But another reason why I'm doing it, aside from just getting the points, is because this particular map has a lot of crossings where if the domain is cold, you'll be able to cross it, where if it's warm, you won't. And there's some islands that you can only reach by crossing, so if you don't have any aquatic units or amphibious units, which we are unlikely to have, especially early in the game, it's good to have a cold dominion so that you can cross those frozen rivers and whatnot. So that's going to be our scales. As you can see, we're heavily invested in scales. Now, as far as magic paths are concerned, I'm going to give him 4 earth. Earth is a main path for Ulm, and with 4 earth, you can pretty much cast all of the big late game earth spells once you factor in items that boost that up to 6. With 6 earth, you can pretty much cast everything, and there are items that will give him that. Next, we're going to give him 3 astral. Now, there are certain spells and items that require astral and earth, specifically mostly items, and they're the crystal items. There's the crystal shield, which boosts the magic paths of your mages by 1 in battle. There's the crystal coin, which boosts your astral, so we can give that to our astral random smiths to make them stronger in astral. And there's the, if we choose to use it late in the game, communion items that also require earth and astral. The next thing we want is 2 fire. Not only because fire is one of the national spell paths of Ulm, but they don't generate any fire gems. So right out of the gate, I want this fellow to be able to find sites of firepower, because we're going to need those fire gems right away. But also, it'll allow us to build some fire boosting items, particularly the Flaming Skull, which is an item that boosts your fire by 1. Now, just to let you know, one of the house rules that I've implemented in this campaign is that we are not going to utilize any death magic whatsoever or summon any undead. Now, things we can do is we can forge death items if necessary, and we can summon mages that are capable of casting death spells as long as they themselves are not summoned using death magic. However, they also cannot cast any death spells. They can, however, site search for death and forge death items. That's all we can do. The in-game thematic reason behind this is that Ulm witnessed the almost destruction of the earth and humanity by usage of death magic, so they're naturally reticent to use it themselves. However, they are not stupid. They are pragmatic, and they know that there are sites of death power in the world that are generating death gems. So their figuring is, well, if they are going to exist, at least we should have control over them and not somebody else. So we can forge death items, but we cannot cast death spells. And one of those items is the Flaming Skull, which will boost your power by 1. We also want 2 air, because that is one of the potential random paths an Ulm Smith can create. So this basically will just allow our fellow here to find sites of air power. And just as a reminder for those who don't know, searching for magic sites is a complicated process, but generally, if you have 1 in a path of magic, you can find about 50% of the available sites for that path. If you have 2 in a path of magic, you can find 75% roughly of the sites of that path. And finally, if you have 3, you can pretty much find all the sites. So I want this guy to be able to find, when he's searching a province, as many sites as possible. 75% I think is a good trade-off for me. So he'll find 100% of earth and astral sites, and about 75% of fire and air, and about 50% of death. So next, we're going to give him some nature. Nature is not a path of magic that any of the natural Ulm mages have access to, but nature is very valuable to us because it allows you to create items that feed your troops. So if we're marching large armies around and we're entering a death domain or we're entering a wasteland province, we're going to need these items to help us out. And there's also some other nature items that benefit us down the line. Now finally, this is going to seem strange to you guys, but we are going to also give him 3 in blood. Now unlike the Ulm of the Late Age, the Vampire Ulm, this Ulm is not a blood hunting nation. They do not have any natural mages that can take advantage of blood. And to be honest with you, we are not going to be casting any blood spells whatsoever. The reason I am doing this is because there is an item that requires blood, slaves, and earth gems, and it's called the Earth Stone. And this is an item that is incredibly beneficial for this nation, because not only does it provide a +1 to earth magic for any mage who has earth magic that is wearing it, but it also generates a free earth gem every battle. And there are a ton of earth spells that are really great earth battlefield spells, but they require a gem. And so instead of having to waste time microing, giving gems to everyone, this particular item will always allow them to have a gem on hand to cast those spells. It requires 3 blood exactly. And there's ways you can do this. You could have less blood and you can empower to a higher level, which I suppose is possible. Or you could have another unit be empowered so that they can take over the blood hunting. And I may decide to do that later on, but for right now, I don't like the idea of wasting time empowering and getting a whole lot of blood slaves. I'm only going to get just a handful, just enough to forge a few of these bloodstones. And thematically, our nation is not evil. But then again, we're not really the good guys either. We're pragmatic. We're about the survival of the human race, and we're almost a bit fascist in the sense that we want to destroy everything that is not human, as well as the Blackholm, who are against us in culture and beliefs. So the use of blood slaves and blood magic, while certainly not a good thing, and it's not something we're going to be overemphasizing or doing a lot of, is acceptable pragmatically in order to create these items that we need. And that is the rationale behind that. Finally, we're going to get a Dominion of 5. Now, the higher your Dominion, the further out your Dominion expands against your enemies. In a multiplayer game, it's very important to have a higher Dominion. For us, we are hopefully, if things work out, going to have a lot of money, and we are going to be able to build temples everywhere. So we do not need necessarily a very high starting Dominion. So this will do us pretty well, and that leaves us with 44 points. Now, I had that filled up. What did I do before? Oh, that's right. I gave us 2 water. Again, just for site searching purposes, water is not a natural path that Ulm uses. However, there are some items that are useful that come out of the water tree, and any gem is a good gem because we can always alchemize it into another gem that's useful for us. And finally, I'll bump up death to 2. Again, just so that we can discover more sites. We're not going to be casting any death spells, or really forging that many death items with the exception of the Flaming Skull, and maybe the occasional Horror Helmet, because fear in battle is very beneficial. So that's us, ladies and gentlemen. Take a moment to look at what I've done. I hope I've explained everything adequately. If you have any questions about what I'm doing, my choices, or any comments, things you think should be different, by all means, in the comments section, let me know. I'd love to hear it. And we're going to name this fellow just our Chief Smith. Because again, he's not a god, he's not a pretender, he's just the elected leader of the Master Smiths. And he just happens to have studied a lot of different magical areas to make himself incredibly diverse, even if he is not particularly strong in any one area. All praise Chief Smith. We're just going to pretend that that's not it. Alright, now in terms of the game settings. So, unlike my other series, we are not going to boost the special site frequency, because the whole point of this is that the Ulmish people want to get rid of magic. They want to destroy magic and remove it from the world. Now, of course, they're going to be using magic in this campaign because they're not stupid and they know that they can't win without it. But the end game result of what they want to achieve is the destruction of magic and also magical creatures from the world. So I'm going to stick with the normal special site frequency of 40. Now what this means is gems are going to be very scarce. We are not going to have gems just coming out of everywhere. We're going to have to be very prudent with the usage of our magic gems. This will all stay the same. Random events will be rare, because if they're common, they just happen way too much, especially in a single player game when you're moving through multiple turns. We're going to enable story events because they're fun. We're going to enable score graphs because I like to see how we're doing versus the other nations. We're going to raise the Hall of Fame entries to 15 just because I love having more people in the Hall of Fame. I just think it's fun for a gameplay and a role-playing perspective. Limited unique artifact forging rate is fine. You know, I mean, we're going to be forging a lot of unique artifacts, but I'm okay with the limit. Research is something that I've put a lot of thought into. In previous Let's Plays, I've done easy research, and I'm going to do that as well in this one. I was toying with the idea of not doing it because, again, we're trying to destroy magic from the world, and it's not really thematic to zoom through the research. But Ulm has some pretty cool late game spells and summons that I really, really want to incorporate into this series. And the only way I can reliably do so is by causing the research to be just a little bit easier. So we're not going to do very easy, but we're going to do easy. And that's going to be visible in the fact that we're going to be moving up the research paths rather quickly at the beginning from like levels 1 to 5. But beyond that, it will become a lot more difficult and will take a lot of time to reach those really juicy endgame spells. As far as victory, like our previous series, we're going to go with the Thrones of Ascension for victory. And I enjoy the Thrones. I enjoy the randomness they bring to the game. I enjoy the different bonuses and malices that they provide when you claim them. So I'm going to go with... what am I going to go with? 2 level 3 Thrones. And those are the toughest Thrones. They provide the best bonuses, but they also have the best defenders. I'm going to go with 4 level 2 Thrones, and we're going to have 6 level 1 Thrones. So that means the total number of Ascension points possible is going to be 20. And in order to win the game, we're going to need exactly half of that plus 1. So we're going to need 11 Ascension points. Now, level 3 Thrones are worth 3 points, level 2 Thrones are worth 2, and level 1 Thrones are worth 1. So in order to get this 11 points, we would need to have any combination of this that adds up to 11. So for example, both of these would give us 6. So we need another 3 level 2s, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or however many level 1s go into that as well. And finally, we are of course going to allow renaming, because I will be renaming all of our commanders after viewers. Alright, well, next episode, we will actually start playing the game. So, once again, I am Marcus Aurelius. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. Hope you're having a good time. And by all means, have a good one.